So this is more of a disturbing story than a scary story, but just the thought of this happening to anyone is terrifying. So when I was 19 years old, I had my first ever job at a pet store. I was super shy and had some social anxiety, but working with people who were constantly talking about animals helped me sort of break out of my shell. Anyway, it was about 8:30, 20 minutes before we closed, and this person walks in. They had the physical appearance of a man, but they were dressed in very feminine clothes. Hey, I ain't judging, do your thing. I'm hanging out by the ferret cages, making sure they were fed and had their water, when they approach me and we start talking about ferrets. We talk about how super cute they are and how they're so sweet, and that they had ferrets themselves when they were younger. Well, when they ask me if I would like to see some pictures of their babies, I say yes, thinking we're still talking about ferrets. Like, hell, I want to see some pictures of baby ferrets. They pull out a scrapbook out of their bag and plop it on top of the ferret cage. The first picture I see is a small pink blob on a paper towel. Now, it took me a second to figure out what I was looking at. They were showing me undeveloped human fetuses laying on what looked like someone's kitchen table. I'm mortified. I have this random person standing right next to me showing me the equivalent of a real-life horror movie. They continued to flip through the book, explaining how each child had died. Oh yeah, there was more than one of them. At this point, I'm just so shocked I'm not even saying anything. I'm standing here, that permanent fake retail work smile just plastered on my face. They finally get to the last picture and talk a little more. I'm in shock at this point, so I'm not even listening. And then they finally leave. I run to the door and lock it behind them. It's literally just me and my manager in the store at this point. I start to walk to the bathroom because I feel like I'm about to throw up, and my manager looks at me and asks me what's wrong. He was in the back doing restock, so I was alone at the front watching the registers and the animals. I tried to explain to him what the fuck I just witnessed, while trying not to puke and cry. He then asks what the person looks like and I explained the description. My manager says if I ever see him again, tell someone and we can call the cops. Luckily, that guy never came back. I'm 22 now and those images are still burned into my memory. Now you can try to tell me that this wasn't real and this person was joking, but why the fuck would you do that? It wasn't even near Halloween or anything. I mean, yeah, I live in a bad town, I understand. Most of the population here is nothing but drug addicts and batshit crazy people, but dear God, I was not expecting that. I no longer work at that store. It closed back in January, so if you ever do try and find out what store I'm talking about, you'll sadly never be able to visit that place that I was mentally scarred at. So this encounter happened to me back in 2017 when I was around 16. For some background information, I went to a boarding school from the ages of 11 to 18. I graduated a few years ago and thoroughly enjoyed my time there. Just so you're aware, boarding schools aren't just for kids who misbehave or are unloved. Anyway, on with the story. My school was broken down into 4 boarding houses, where you lived, slept, and all of your belongings were in your respective rooms, of course. Each boarding house had their own housemaster or mistress. Mine was a great, caring and understanding gentleman who undoubtedly made my time at school much better. Each boarding house at about 3 or 4 corridors spread around the house with around 10 to 12 rooms each. My school was like over 100 years old and had its fair share of deaths within its walls over the years. A few teachers, such as my housemaster, stated that they experienced weird and unusual things happen in certain corridors when the school was empty for the holidays. The story I'm about to tell you may not seem that scary, however, it is something that has definitely intrigued me for the past couple of years. My corridor was situated at the time at the upstairs portion of the boarding house. It was a Saturday night. I was watching a TV show on my iPad. The last time I checked, the clock was around 2 AM, and I was thinking about going to bed pretty soon. All of a sudden, the corridor lights just flickered on. I seen the flash perfectly as there was a slight gap under my door, and the light reflected onto the bottom of my sink. Just to note, the lights are triggered by motion. Someone or something had to be moving in the corridor. I thought, okay, it's just the lights. It's probably just going somewhere for a pee. As I thought that, the thick, heavy double door swung open, and I heard light footsteps walk past my room. This door needed a lot of force to successfully open. It was located halfway in the corridor. The toilet was located at the end of the corridor, and that's the door I next heard screech open. Its loud, often annoying sound was very distinct. A short while later, I heard the door open and close again, with more footsteps heading back the way it came from. The footsteps then stopped outside my door. After pausing my show, I began to get nervous, sinking feeling. Something was up. From my bed, I looked underneath my door and I could see no shadow. It wasn't a human standing on the opposite side. I got up and walked over to the door. Anxiously, I stood waiting. I can't even describe the feeling of nervousness at that moment. It all happened so fast, yet so slow, and a few minutes went by before I finally opened the door. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It didn't make sense. The lights, the double door, the toilet door, the footsteps, I have no idea what it was. My housemaster often told me stories of strange noises and doors slamming shut in that exact corridor. I firmly believe that it was a ghost on the other side of my door that night. And before any of you ask, yes, my windows were shut and there was no wind or breeze. I spoke to my friends, housemaster, and other people who lived in my corridor. All said that they had never experienced anything like that before. There wouldn't have been the time, nor would it have been quiet enough for a person to get back into their room without me noticing. Like I said, it's not the scariest story, but a real interesting one for sure. A couple of years ago, I was living with two other roommates near the university I was studying at. I was a freshman, and they were both a year ahead of me. The three of us got along pretty well, but while they were always out having fun late at night, I was the homebody of the three. They would go out to various campus events and parties, and I would always enjoy the little privacy of the apartment. We were living in a 2-story colonial-style home near the university. The house was painted in blue and white, matching school colours. Whenever my roommates were gone for a night, I would be home doing classwork or playing Xbox. The guys wouldn't really be home until really late, close to midnight. There was this one night where they had left for a game at the stadium in September going into October. It was getting cold outside, and there was a noticeable draft in the apartment. They would be gone for several hours, while I got to have some peace and quiet. I was playing Call of Duty when the blackout happened. One minute I was on a kill streak, and the next, my room was plunged into blackness. I was startled by the sudden power outage. As I looked around my room, I took a second to calm myself down and looked outside my window. I pulled the curtains to find no other sources of light on my street. Likewise, street lamps were also dead, and there was no moon that night either. It was like the entire world had gone dark that night. Without any light, I was feeling panic creep into me. At this point, my sense of hearing increased to make up for the lack of sight. From downstairs, I could hear the back door open with a long, almost deliberate creak. I was relieved at the idea of my roommates being home. I was feeling for my door when I felt the knob hand. I was going to go downstairs to tell them what happened, but I didn't. Instead, I turned the deadbolts and locked myself inside. Downstairs, I heard heavy footsteps walk around the kitchen. I couldn't understand at the time why I was staying quiet or why I had locked the door. It was my roommates, right? Then it hit me, and fear was gripping my heart. My roommates were never this quiet when coming home. They would always barge through the front door, whooping and hollering about the fun they had. They would even shout my name just to try to annoy me. I turned my back to the door and slammed my body against the wooden surface. I made a louder sound than I meant to. The footsteps downstairs stopped for a time. Whoever was down there must have heard me. Then they started back up again, this time coming to the stairs. I heard each loud thud of boots walking up each step, getting closer and closer to my door, and then finally just stopping outside my door. Even in that cold room, I was sweating profusely. I took light and shallow breaths, trying to be as quiet as possible. The intruder was still behind my bedroom door, never making a sound. I was stood there for an indeterminate length of time. I was feeling so uncomfortable from standing for what felt like hours. Did the intruder know I was there? What were they doing there, just standing while not making a sound? I couldn't find a way out of my room with it being so dark. My eyes began to focus on the window, leading to a 2-story drop to the driveway below. I was desperate enough to fly out that way and take my chances with the pavement. But was this what the intruder wanted? Were they waiting for me to make some kind of noise and break in? Maybe. Anytime they could just break down the door. I had to leave before they had that idea. I walked away from my door, trying to stay quiet. I reached the window and opened it when I heard the footsteps start again, this time leaving my hallway and down the stairs. I heard a slight but very noticeable click from the door downstairs. I didn't leave my room after that. Even when the lights miraculously turned on, I crouched next to my window and allowed myself proper breathing. A rush of tears and mucus rushed out my face, like fear decided to leave my body in the form of a crying fit. I heard my roommates come back for real this time at around 1:30 a.m, making their usual shouts. Never before was I so happy to hear their voices at top level, but when they reached my room, however, they became uncharacteristically quiet. That sent me into another panic. I heard them say, "Adam, you in there?" I walked to my bedroom door and replied, "Yeah, I'm in here." "Did you write this?" I finally unlocked my door to ask them what they meant. On the outside was a message in a red marker saying, "You should lock your back door. Someone could break in." He ended that with a smiley face.